Welcome to this National Archaeology Week panel discussion on the future of teaching and learning archaeology in Australia, presented in partnership with the Australian National Committee for Archaeology Teaching and Learning. So I'm joining you this evening from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people near Naarm. I would like to extend my respects to elders both past and present and acknowledge their continuing connection to land and to waters and also to community. I think archaeology in Australia, as is the case elsewhere in the world, is deeply entangled with colonialism. It's important that we acknowledge this context tonight as we discuss the future of archaeological training in Australia and how we can use the training of the next generation of archaeologists to really help disrupt this narrative. So to introduce our panellists this evening, we have Dave Johnson-Pitt, who is an academic staff member and PhD scholar in the School of Archaeology and Anthropology at the Australian National University. Akwandamooka and Erubim Leeman, Dave is one of Australia's first Indigenous archaeologists, graduating from the ANU with honours in 1989. Dave's passion remains assisting the Australian archaeological community in its efforts to decolonise itself, developing new approaches to training and practice. We also have Sven Usman, who is a senior lecturer in the School of Social Sciences at the University of Western Australia. Sven is an archaeologist who does not consider exams and grades to be useful. He has taught in universities as well as in prisons and in school and to school children via the CSIRO's Scientists in Schools program. In 2023, Sven was awarded a citation for outstanding contributions to student learning in the Australian Awards for University Teaching. We also have Zach Roberts, who is a Walbunja Yuin man from the New South Wales South Coast. Zach is an Indigenous ECR Fellow in the Department of Critical Indigenous Studies at Macquarie University, where he teaches Indigenous histories, knowledges and archaeologies. In 2022, he was the recipient of the John Mulvaney Fellowship from the Australian Academy of the Humanities for work exploring Indigenous engagement with migrant communities. And finally, we have Megan Stace, who is an archaeologist and an educator. She graduated from her archaeology degree in 2019 while working as an early career archaeologist across Australia. She also encountered many challenges and misconceptions surrounding the cultural significance of Indigenous Australia. So choosing to address this at the root cause of the issue, education, Megan commenced a Master of Teaching, majoring in both history and French education, with the aim of shifting the mindset of secondary education to include more Indigenous perspectives in her classroom. So now she works as a history, geography and business teacher at St Peter's Girls in Adelaide. And Megan shares her passion and love for learning with her students and endeavours to give the next generation a more integrated learning experience surrounding Indigenous perspectives. My name is Georgia Stannard. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Archaeology and History at La Trobe University in Naarm, and I'm the co-chair of the Australian National Committee for Archaeology Teaching and Learning. And I'm going to be chairing this panel discussion here this evening. Okay, so our first question. So it's wonderful having everyone here tonight, and thank you so much to our audience for coming along as well. And I'm sure our panel, you'll agree that our panel brings such a diversity of skills and experience to our theme, the future of teaching and learning archaeology in Australia. So to kick us off tonight, I thought a good place to begin is with tertiary education. So nearly all professional Australian archaeologists are trained through the university system. And this sector has seen huge changes over the last decade, and many of these have directly impacted archaeological education. So Sven, I was wondering, as someone who has many years of experience in training future archaeologists in tertiary education, what you see as some of the big challenges currently facing archaeological education in Australia through our universities.
Righto. First off, Nalakadich Wajak, Mutken Karak, Nijabuja. I acknowledge the unceded Wajak lands from here way out west in Bootaloo, Perth, and extend my respects to all Indigenous people attending today. And thanks to Ann Cattle and Georgia and everyone for getting this together today. So we've each got I'm looking forward to all of the learnings from today. And I look at this, the question is, I'll add and opportunities to it. So challenges and opportunities. So as an academic, we want evidence-based stuff. And so that's why behind me, sorry, I'm dyslexic and it looks like I lack direction as well. Something my mother's been telling me for some time. She still thinks I'm going to get a real job. But what we did, and Carly Monks and Georgia led this, is we published up a survey, I think it was last year from the year before, of figuring out who's in front of us. So someone said to me, don't teach who you were 20, 30 years ago, teach who's in front of you today. So we do have the luxury of having Geraldine Mate and Sean Olm's regular update of what the professional archaeology side looks like, but we've lacked who our commencing students are. And there's some stats up there behind you that you can have a look at, sort of cold from that article. If you haven't seen it, it's a good read for preparing yourself for who's there. And notice the one on health. 36% of our incoming students report being neurodiverse or being differently abled physically or mentally. So based on the 2022 census, the national figure is about 20%. So we've got almost double that. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means we've got a more diverse cohort, but it does give challenges to us to, for example, in a field-based discipline, sometimes how we accommodate people. We've recently, for example, looked at our labs to see if the doorways are wide enough for all types of wheelchairs, where the bench heights are sitting. Can we reconfigure the field, not necessarily just to be, kind of out there, but can it be an archive? Can it be a lab? Can we accommodate folks like that as well? And with this comes just about a month ago, which many people will be familiar with now, the Universities Accord. So this is the federal government saying, universities, you haven't done a great job so far of looking after students necessarily. I was just reading something this morning from a UK context, how trans and non-binary students have about a 50% chance of not finishing university. Many have good experiences, but many don't, for example. So there's a challenge in terms of our representativity. 60% of archaeologists look at Aboriginal, Indigenous archaeology as their primary focus, but fewer than 5% of our archaeologists are Aboriginal or identify as such. And we have a roughly similar number for incoming students, for example. So for me, the challenge to start off with is twofold. We've both got people coming onto university, and I'll just park that for a moment. But then the second part, and this I think hopefully will link to Dave's presentation at the end, who's not coming to university and why are they not coming to university? So at one, it's a general sense. All Australians should know more about the country's archaeology. We have a very low level of archaeological literacy around. It's changing through the schools. The kids love it. The teachers love it, though they lack resource material. But then what are the impediments to, as identified in the Universities Accord, rural, low socioeconomic status, disabled and Indigenous coming to campus? So that's why I had that kind of no exams or no grades. I actually don't think exams are that useful in most kinds of archaeology. They're very stressful. They test a certain kind of modality. And if you crash out in that, well, you sort of buggered, aren't you? And is that what we're about? If you don't know the half-life of radiocarbon, is that such a disaster? You can sort of look it up. But then the ungrading one, this is stuff I'd done in Southern Africa, where you've got people coming first in family, not been at university, maybe not done so well at school. So why would you come to a place that, in your view, is all about grades? So what happens if we had a few sort of inverted commas, soft landing units where it's not unassessed, it's ungraded? So you're still assessed, you're given guidance on what works, what doesn't work, how to improve it. Things like the skills passport, be competency-based. So Mel and Georgia won an award for this, quite rightly. And if it's not working over one semester, well, just extend the period to, for example, 2 semesters. There is still a lot of resistance to this, even from colleagues and university hierarchies, but something to consider. And that might help get more people to university. Not everyone has to go to university, but we should certainly make it possible. Also, then we've got to look at the degree. Not everyone can take 3 years plus honours to look at archaeology. We've got a lot of land managers, people in government, rangers, all of those actually that already have a lot of knowledge. And through things like skills passports, diplomas, certs, micro-credentials, more and more of these are coming up. Those are the kinds of pathways I think that people have. So the challenge is for us to get these together. And I saw in Queensland there was a good one coming up. There's another one in Southern TAFE here coming up. So that'll satisfy a whole new bunch of people who are interested in archaeology or an archaeological competence, but don't want to sit a whole course which is expensive and takes time and is in a language they might not always understand, for example. And we might even go to community. I think learning on country is incredibly powerful for us to have. So it's really, to me, the main challenge is who's not here, who should be here, and how do we get them here? So those are some brief ideas. I'm not going to go on much more because we've only got 5 minutes each. I'll look at a few things. Sometimes people say, I was just chatting to colleagues generally about this presentation. They said, AI is a major challenge. I disagree. Talking to students is they actually quite sophisticated in how they use AI. They're relatively, this is in archaeology now, they're relatively arm's length. They want to do their own thing. And, we shouldn't be, my job is not there as the police officer to punish people for using AI. It's to promote excellence kind of thing. So I actually think there are very interesting ways to use AI, and it's more of an opportunity than a challenge. And then from the stats and that we've, other than being very, Euro-Australian, we're otherwise pretty diverse, age, experience, all of those kinds of things. And that's certainly something that I think is a strength, and to draw from all of those to really have participative learning where, take unit feedback and that seriously to sort of say, okay, how do we change these things so that they talk to a workforce that is going to have, the research tells us, 2 to 3 distinct careers. And again, this is where archaeology is really good because we can port from, archaeology to heritage, to native title, to government, to quite a lot of things. So very real challenges, it's true, but I think that the opportunities are very strong there as well. And I think that's my time, and I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sven. That was a really good summary, I think, of some of those challenges and opportunities that are facing us in tertiary education. So, Zach, I have a question for you. As an early career researcher who's currently teaching Indigenous archaeology at university, I was wondering what challenges have you encountered and where do you see the most need for change in the future?
It's a really good question. I think I should preface this by saying that I don't actually teach out of the Department of History and Archaeology at my university. So I work out of the Department of Critical Indigenous Studies, which has a very interdisciplinary scope. So we touch on a lot of issues to do with history and heritage, but also sociological, anthropological, all sorts of things. So my area of focus is Indigenous histories, Indigenous knowledges, and that necessarily encompasses Indigenous archaeologies. But it's interesting because I get a lot of students from the history department, from people who are doing archaeology degrees or doing ancient history degrees who, get to a certain point in their studies and realize that there's not a lot of opportunity in the history and archaeology department to directly engage with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, let alone the history and heritage side of that. There are a few, but they tend to be like a one-week topic that's tucked in somewhere that doesn't give a lot of depth or breadth to the extent that I think students need. And I think that there's a growing recognition from those students that if they want to pursue a career in Australia that's not in the academic side of things, then they need to have that experience. They need to know something about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and cultures and histories if they want to get a job in the heritage sector, or if they want to be an archaeologist in Australia. And those are unfortunately not offered at a lot of institutions. I found personally, I mean, I'm only like a week out having submitted my PhD. I still consider myself a student in a lot of ways. But I found throughout my student career that a lot of places, a lot of institutions in Australia teach archaeology as a classics degree or as an Egyptology degree. And I think that, I mean, I'm sure Megan will build on this. I think that comes on from the way that high schools teach history or ancient history as being Greece and Rome and Egypt. And it's only very recently that Australia's been added to that deep time aspect. And so students come into university wanting to be an archaeologist and have a vision of what that means that doesn't necessarily include this continent. And I think the way modern history is taught has also given them a certain perception of Aboriginal people that isn't true as well. And so there's all these preconceptions of students coming into university. And it's only when they start actually seriously thinking, oh, where is this degree going to take me? When they get to the second year, maybe, that they go, oh, I need to maybe do something on this continent. And they don't know how to get that because they're a year and a half into a classics degree. And how do you put Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures into a classics degree? So in where I am at Macquarie, often they'll then come to Indigenous studies and end up in my unit. My unit actually was designed out of recognizing that there was a need for that somewhere. So yeah, I get a lot of history students. I get a lot of education students. Actually, I think the largest single cohort of students that come through my units are actually primary and secondary education students, because they also know that they are going to probably, if not teach these topics, but they're going to have students who are Aboriginal and see this as a way of gaining more cultural capacity in that sense, I think. Yeah, I think that about covers it, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think we'll probably segue into a lot of those points with some of the other, perspectives that we're going to hear tonight. And I know that from our earlier discussions that we had, a lot of these themes are seen across institutions across Australia, tertiary institutions across Australia. So it's certainly something that's quite broad.
Yeah, actually, I might add something as well. As as an Aboriginal student going through archaeology, I think I was maybe one of two people that I knew my entire university studies who was Aboriginal. And I think going back to what I was saying about, and what you just said actually about how this is something that's seen across the continent. I think with mob, there's you might get some mob that are willing to travel to a different state to get their university degree. I was not one of those people. And so as someone who grew up on the South Coast, Sydney was about as far north as I wanted to travel. I did not want to go to Adelaide. I did not want to go to Victoria to get my university degree. And I knew that I wanted to do archaeology. I knew I wanted to do history, but I had to work with what I was with as far as I was willing to travel away from my home, my family, my country. And so I think, there's a bit of an untapped market, I think, where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people could be, and will be and are really great contributors to the heritage sector and to professional archaeology and to academic archaeology. We have a certain amount of knowledge that is integral to these areas. But if we can't access the degrees that give us entry into those careers because the universities are offering archaeology as a classics degree, there's a bit of a barrier there where we're not catering to a certain demographic who could be and would be very would benefit that trajectory. And so I think there's a few different intersections here where there needs to be a bit more critical thinking, I think, in terms of the pathways and the access to the degrees that are going to give the right people, the enthusiastic people, a leg up into those career pathways as well. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's no. That's, I think that's the perfect segue into hearing perhaps from Dave about some of the work that he's been doing. And so, I know that certainly in recent decades, there's been as you say, this growing recognition of the importance for learning about Indigenous heritage. also through our space in learning about the importance of that heritage through on-country learning opportunities. And Dave, I know firsthand the huge impact that learning from elders and community on country can have on the way that young archaeologists see the discipline through my own experiences in your field schools when I was an undergrad. So I was wondering what role you see this type of archaeological teaching and learning playing in the development of best practice methods in the next generation of archaeologists.
Thanks, Georgia. Firstly, I'm on Ngunnawal Ngambri country, so I'm just paying my respects to the elders and to all elders wherever you folks are, and also to say thanks everyone for joining us. And thanks, Georgia, for organising this session, and Caroline. So, I mean, this is, I think, a key part of learning archaeology in Australia. In a nutshell, and excuse me going through some of my points, you know, only Indigenous Australians can teach archaeologists to think in an Indigenous, culturally competent way by listening and learning from our elders. And this goes across any Indigenous studies at any university to have an understanding. I mean, our elders are the professors of Indigenous Australian knowledges. When you learn from our elders, you know and hopefully learn and appreciate our views and knowledges so that we can all work together as partners. But the bottom line of that is it's about respect. And again, this is not just strictly for the Australian archaeological discipline, it's any Indigenous studies. It's something I think we need to address across our university Western educational systems to indigenize it, or as we say, decolonize some of these old ways of thinking and learning. So it is about respect. You know, with respect, you can communicate and learn and understand and appreciate other cultural norms. Indigenous knowledges can add, as I've always said, can add volumes to the world academic understanding of history and the peopling of the world. And therefore, and therefore our understanding of worldviews or cultural views, and they are also reflected in our worldviews today. The importance of it in terms of, say, the courses we've done, I mean, my whole, besides my university system, is learning off working out in the country. I've done now for 35 years off the many communities I've had the privilege of working with for over 30 years. I love Sven's point, Zach's point, that he's still a student. Well, 7 years into my career, I'm still a student too. That's the exciting side of this. And but it's the Indigenous knowledges that are coming through from our elders, and every community is different and has a history. There's some key elements of, you know, caring for country, you know, looking after our burials and sites, etc. But each place is different, and we do need to have that opportunity if you're wanting to work somewhere, or being a student coming into studying archaeology and wanting to do Australian archaeology. As we say, listen and learn from our elders. It's the cultural competency, I think, is the key to, you know, maybe changing your worldview of respect, appreciating and learning the Indigenous knowledge from the people whose knowledge it is, and also learning our, you know, what we say, our cultural, you know, obligations. That's important. So to learn it, such as George, we ran I coordinated the Mungo field school with all the elders. They were the teachers, I was the facilitator. But importantly, with that, there's a whole heap of Indigenous knowledges that aren't actually recorded in our learning. So we have a textbook. Well, things are changing, but by consulting with elders, I'll give some of the examples that I mean, the knowledge of, say, for ring trees or scarred trees. We have a cultural knowledge and association from the various areas for people making them. There's a purpose. And that's I guess the anthropology, the oral histories related to that are vitally important. That can be taught to the students from our elders where appropriate. Having understandings of the intangible sites and places. What's important about this is to learn about, and what Isabel, Emerita Professor Isabel McBride taught for years, was the social significance of a place or site. What is its importance to the people whose site and heritage it is? And that's really important to have, learning that from the elders, so that when we practice as archaeologists, you have an appreciation and hopefully a commitment also to record those values. And that's something that's missing very much across the consultancy industry and the heritage regimes. It was in place, but after mining booms and influences of Murdoch medias and the, dumbing down of our heritage legislations, these key components of why these places are important to us are very important for students to learn, so they can assist. So it's about those partnerships. Very quickly going through, learning from the elders why the importance of our obligations to our ancestors and our burial grounds, why we shouldn't be digging them up, how, protecting them, acknowledging the massacre sites and what they mean to us and the importance to us. The whole notion through our elders teaching about the notion that has kept us alive forever about caring for country, caring for self, family, and having a leadership obligation to look after or plan for our children's future. The aspects from elders, learning why we should be seeking permissions to consult with Aboriginal people and elders about doing research, but also looking at asking elders and learning what the aspirations of a particular Indigenous community might be in terms of their heritage aspirations. We've been practicing in things like the Mungo School and other areas where we're asking elders, what would you like? How can we fit into that? So it's another way of doing archaeology, but also rather than us being the subject, we're actually the partner or recognised as the professors and initiating aspects. It just adds volume. Where else was I going there? So learning from our communities, you begin to learn cultural competency and appreciation, and it adds volumes to our knowledge and learning. And importantly, what I'll say and conclude on this, having a respect for the particular community you might be working for, their values towards heritage, their sites, knowing that also opens many opportunities with your relationship with that particular community in terms of career opportunities. It's not just the archaeological jobs in the universities, which are very scarce, the museums. Being an archaeologist opens up doors where communities will ask you as a trusted heritage advisor to, endless opportunities, managing the heritage database or whatever. There's many employment opportunities that we don't identify as by archaeologists working directly with communities. My whole career has been doing that. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now, folks. But there are so many benefits, and it's about mutual respect.
Those are wonderful comments. Thank you so much, Dave. Okay, so I think that is actually a really great segue into the sort of the one of the last aspects we're hoping to cover this evening. And I think the underpinning aspect to much of what we've discussed tonight is looking at primary and secondary education. And this is something that over the last few years that Anketel has really broadened its remit to include. Historically, Anketel, the Australian National Committee for Archaeology Teaching and Learning, has been restricted in thinking more about tertiary archaeological education because this is essentially where we train our future archaeologists. But with the new Deep Time History of Australia unit entering the Australian curriculum, Georgia Williams, who's on with us tonight, the co-chair of Anketel, and I really wanted to expand the remit of what we were looking at in terms of how is archaeology portrayed in primary and secondary education, and also particularly how is Australian archaeology portrayed or not, as the case might be. So Megan, you are a teacher in school who also has trained as an archaeologist. So I think, really your perspective provides this wonderful bridge between these two fields and how we might move forward. And I was wondering if you could share with us what some of the opportunities and perhaps some of the challenges you're finding with teaching some of these new aspects of Australian archaeology in the curriculum for your students?
That's a very loaded question, and I have lots of thoughts about it, which is great. I think our main issue, which comes back to a lot of what we've already discussed tonight, is that until the deep time of history of Australia came in, it was very much a colonised curriculum. I mean, it still is today. You take the SACE, so in South Australia we do SACE, and the Ancient Studies program is very centred around that classics program. It's Rome, it's Greece, it's Peru, all of these different civilizations, and Australia sort of put in there as like a sort of afterthought. And I think that really sums up, unfortunately, what the Australian curriculum has been for quite some time, when we regard Indigenous stories and histories and voices, and just the archaeology of Australia. One benefit of now having the deep time unit is that we're given a chance to actually rewrite the way that we educate our current generations. I work at a school that's from ELC all the way through to year 12, and even in the ELC with our little toddlers and our 3-year-olds, we have started a bush tucker program where they actually go out with the elders of the Ghana community and they learn about bush tucker. And it's this collaborative sort of opportunity that we now have to make the curriculum sort of speak for itself in a way and shift the mindsets of how we are teaching these stories. I think Dave said it really, really well when he said that to collaborate with communities to get the elders to actually help and support and have that mutual respect is so important in our secondary education as well. And in my past experience with the deep time unit, we've been able to do that. So we have an Indigenous representative who works with our students twice a week in their classrooms when we teach that unit, so that they can teach their stories and their history, and we can weave that into their learning. I also think it gives a fantastic opportunity for students to take that sort of prior knowledge when we then talk about federation and colonisation in Year 9, so that they can actually understand the massive impact that that had, and not just look at the perspective of what colonisation meant for Australia in modern day, but also what it meant for our communities and our long withstanding Indigenous history. And even today I had conversations with my students about racism and unconscious bias. We talked about the voice, we talked about all of these different things that were happening in Australia today that links back to that history. And I think without that deep time of Australia unit, showing them and providing them with a sort of perspective of our history, our long withstanding history, they don't get that opportunity to actually think about the impact that it has on modern day. So yeah, I think that's sort of the curriculum in a nutshell. I think one of the main challenges is stepping away from that stereotypical concept of archaeology. I'm definitely a culprit of myself. I went into a Bachelor of Archaeology hell-bent on doing Italian and Spanish archaeology, and I was going to study human remains, and I then got into Indigenous archaeology as a aftermath of COVID, because I couldn't go overseas and be an archaeologist in all of these European countries. And that is one of the best things that's ever happened to me, both professionally and personally, because I think it makes me a much better teacher to be able to be in the classroom and have all of the experiences that I had on country with the traditional owners that I worked with, to be able to provide a much more rich and challenging curriculum for my students, and to get them to get out of their comfort zone a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's, I think, fabulous observations. And I mean, I see this in students I teach at uni, where, well, even stepping further back, teachers who I work with to train in this area, you know, they're saying, well, we never heard anything about this sort of history when we went to school. And then you step back down to tertiary students. Well, we didn't learn anything about this when we were at school, you know, and I certainly didn't learn anything about this before I went to university. But then I see my own kids, and Lillian is 11, she's about to turn 13. And she is learning deep time at school, which is really exciting. But even there is a huge gap in the knowledge that she has gained through her experience, and there's a 6-year gap between her and her brother James. James, even from when he was, like you're saying, ELC, early learning, you know, contexts, he would know that his kinder was on the other side of the river, which is on Wadawurrung country where we live, and then on our side of the river is Wurundjeri country. And he would go to kinder and he would do an acknowledgement of country every morning at school, at kinder. And he would, you know, there's actions that go along. I won't, you know, torture you all with my singing to this evening, but he would be able to do his acknowledgement of country, which included his friends and the country that he was on. And he knew when he would come home as a 2-year-old that he would stand up on his bed and he would do his acknowledgement, but he would do it to Wurundjeri community because he knew the difference between country. And I think for someone of my generation, it would be extremely unusual for us to go through school knowing whose country we're on, to have an introduction to an Australian history that foregrounded the deep time component, the pre-colonial component of Australia's history. And I just see so much opportunity with this new unit, and seeing opportunity to reframe not just our students, but our students who will go on to form members of society and who will then teach other people. And slowly that, you know, that marker will tick across to, instead of having that inbuilt deficit of knowledge about deep time and our pre-colonial history, we will have a body of people in society who celebrate the complexity and the diversity and the nuance that is Australia's history. Zach, I think you have something you would like to add to this as well.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether we were doing raising hands, but I thought I'd do it just for funsies. You made me remember something else that I've got a huge cohort of education students who come through my unit. I've also got a really big cohort, and they're some of my favorite students, and they're retired old ladies who have had their career and they've come back to uni because they can, and they often do things like a Bachelor of Creative Writing. And I love this cohort so much, because they come into my unit and they come up to me after class on week 1 and they go, I'm 87 years old and I've never thought about Aboriginal people before in my life, but this came up on my electives list. I really want to rectify the wrongs of my education. And I love it so much, because they're so self-reflective and they're so self-aware of the way that their schooling years were, back in the day. And a lot of it's come from because they've seen their children and their grandchildren, particularly grandchildren, who come to their house after school and do their homework, and they're looking at the work that their grandchildren are doing and going, I have no idea what any of this is. I never learned this. I don't know whose country we're on. I don't know what the difference between countries are. I don't know the difference between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. I don't know what South Sea Islander is. I don't know what any of these words mean. And they've taken that on and they've reflected in some way, and now they're coming back to uni and they're doing Indigenous studies units because they have a genuine interest in educating themselves. And they're some of my best students, because they have that reflection, they have that genuine desire to be there. Whereas I think a lot of other students know they should be there for X, Y, and Z reasons, and they're doing the learning, but they're not as engaged because they don't necessarily have that personal drive that my old white aunties do, and I love them so much. You just made me remember that. So
I think that's a beautiful reflection. Thank you, Zach. May.
Sorry, so many ideas. I like it. Zach, you just made me want to talk about like changing the mindset of how our current students see the history of Australia as well. And I think part of it, and one of my year 9 students, I mean, they're 14, but one of my year 9 students this morning said, it's how you are up, like you were brought up, reflects how you are perceiving things in the classroom. So she was talking about how she quite often doesn't hear anything from her parents about their education, or if she does, it's usually about, you know, England and the Empire and the British Empire and how amazing that was. And she said it's really interesting because when you tell students that you're about to study, you know, colonization, federation, or deep time of Australia, their automatic response, which is so embedded into them, is to go, oh, not again. Because we're in this mindset where it's just been so poorly taught in the whole history of, you know, education in Australia, that their automatic response is, I don't want to do this. And almost straight away, as an educator or a teacher, you are just gut-wrenched at the fact that your students are in your classroom and they already have that preconceived idea that they're going to hate the topic. And I think what gives us an opportunity to actually rectify that is getting as many families involved, getting, you know, like you said, your old white aunties involved and re-educating, maybe not just tertiary and secondary education, but maybe, you know, the older generations that are retired and are in the stage where they want to actually relearn all the stuff that they missed out on learning in school because we didn't actually provide it for them.
I think that's a fabulous aspiration for where we want to move in the future. Georgia Williams, would you like to add something to that?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Georgia. Yes, I just want to quickly add on what Zach and May said. So I did my undergraduate degree in archaeology, and I've currently just started my master's in secondary teaching. I just was a bit late coming home from prac this afternoon, so apologies for being late. But no, I totally just want to just get behind what they have said. And yeah, I do school visits with my current job at Everett Foundation, and yeah, some teachers just say, "Oh, my students aren't interested in Indigenous history," and I go, "Well, how do you know that?" Like it's just as May was saying, just that mindset, changing that mindset, and as Zach was saying as well. But at the current school I'm at, they trialed deep time history this year, and their students loved it. And their 2 teachers actually came to the Anketal Teacher PD Day that we held at the 2023 AAA conference, and they were just so enthusiastic, and they went back away, and they just put all their effort and might into doing deep time justice, and they were so excited, and they showed me all of the student exams and all their things that they'd done, and it was just incredible to kind of see that transition, and they said the students loved it as well. So just to see that transition from some teachers who were kind of maybe, and students set in their ways of that preconceived ideas, and then actually seeing other teachers and students actually just running with it and it being a success. So I'm really hopeful for Deep Time and Year 7, and it's just been such an awesome experience to be at this school that is kind of taking it and running with it and like just going above and beyond. So just wanted to add my 2 cents, but it's just incredible.
I think we see that really echoed across primary, secondary, tertiary, and public outreach. Anytime, I know I've talked to you all about opportunities to do this in the past, and I think all of us have said every time we introduce people to pre-colonial Australian history and the amazing record that is, people always walk away with their minds blown about how amazing this is and how they never learned about it before, and why were they coming into it thinking that it was one way and not this way. So I think from that I would like to pose to you all our final question before we go to some Q&A from our wonderful audience. Given all this context we've been talking about, I wanted to ask each of you, what piece of advice would you give to someone who is interested, perhaps having listened to this discussion, about studying Australian archaeology? Do you have any particular advice that you would like to impart? Sven, can I call upon you first?
In my case, it would be, don't listen to your mother. She thinks I'm still going to become a lawyer and get a real job and not be an archaeologist. Look, I think a lot of it is really just, with this research that's coming in showing that people are going to have lots of different kinds of jobs, it's not a bad way to go. Like at open days, I say to folks, you've got to take some electives and things anyway. This is interesting. You learn a lot of skills with it, and it's fun. I don't mean fun in just a frivolous way, as is just being presented. It's fun because it matters. We do have. I've just added 2 points to my thing around cultural safety and decolonization. We do have a lot of challenges, but they're meaty challenges. And the end point is to say to people, archaeology isn't this niche discipline. It actually can play a front and center role in healing and reconciliation. I mean, Dave was talking, for example, about the massacre sites that can be very confronting in one way, but in another way, we do have to have these hard conversations to get past that, to get to, what does it, so the big project to me is what does it mean to be Australian in a broad sense? And, it'd be interesting to see 5 to 10 years from now, what we could have. We've got good uptake in the schools. And so I think archaeology has a good role to play there. So I think, take archaeology anyway, whatever. I'd say to anyone in Australia, take archaeology because it's interesting to do. We've got at least a dozen universities at present. By sort of rule of thumb, we've maybe got 5,000 or 6,000 students a year going through our courses. We definitely need to get that up. The thing is, this is my advice. Be bolshy. Don't accept necessarily what you're taught or how it's taught. We're in a period of flux. We want to see, we don't know what the archaeology of the future is. I'm nearer my death than my birth, so it's better that people that are younger come in and give the content. I can maybe give some skills and facilitate that content coming in. So yeah, be bolshy. Don't accept anything and have fun and be respectful.
That's great. Thank you. Dave, do you have any advice for students considering taking Australian archaeology, either in secondary or in tertiary units?
Absolutely. I mean, all the years I've been 37 years doing archaeology, and with our elders and myself have faced some pretty big challenges on the way. It's evolving, and I'm still here. I love this discipline. I love Australian archaeology and the changes that are occurring. So as one of the earliest Indigenous archaeologists is that we need more ethically trained and culturally aware archaeologists. So please come and join us. Ethical archaeological practice benefits everyone. It's important also for us to having archaeologists who think like us, are aware, who have been taught and have that patience to be taught, to benefit our communities in pursuing the protection of our really important sites and places. It shouldn't just be us alone trying to protect or lobby for the heritage legislation reforms. One of the roles of Indigenous archaeologists, which I love to put down as a list one time, which I would invite all to consider, who takes the mining companies on when our communities are calling out for stop the destruction? Indigenous archaeologists do. There should be more of our colleagues in doing that. But the opportunities are enormous by having that relationship with the community. As I said earlier, it's a career that and I agree with Zach, you just never stop learning, which, is a part of the thing of doing archaeology, exploring and learning. And our elders, what I say in general to the general public, and having been a stolen gen, as I've learnt from many communities over, 30-something years, is that learning through our elders and the knowledge and appreciating, as you do, that our communities and then our law peoples have adds so much to your life and also your perspective of yourself, the country. And my invitation is for young archaeologists, when you come through, we welcome you, but know that your 3-4 years, or if you do a PhD at the university, is just the beginning of your learning, because there's a greater university out there, and that's our Indigenous elders knowledge. And we invite you to come and join us.
Thank you so much, Dave. Zach, would you like to provide any advice?
Mine very much piggybacks off what Dave just said, and I think my biggest piece of advice is to just get involved and ask questions. I've never met, like, I know I'm always so happy when people ask me questions about my country and its heritage and its sacred sites and its places and its the people that are connected to those places. I know all of my aunties and uncles love that as well. I think they were actually really glad when I started studying archaeology because they had someone who was willing to sit down and listen. So I think, and that's not just for if you're mob. I know that my aunties and uncles love when non-Indigenous people come and sit down and have a cuppa and ask questions, because we love sharing our history and our places with people, and we love doing that with people who then want to use that knowledge to help protect it and to help advocate for it and to help raise the importance of these places. So I think my biggest piece of advice is to just ask questions and be involved.
That's wonderful. Thanks. May, would you like to have some advice?
My advice is very simple. Just do it. It is so rewarding, enriching. I ended up not in archaeology, but I can tell you that I have absolutely become a better person and a better teacher. And I think much more in depth about what my world looks like and what I want my world to look like because of my experience in Indigenous archaeology. And I wouldn't trade that in for the world. So just do it. It's so good.
Perfect way to finish us off for this afternoon. If anyone has any questions, we would love to help answer these, resolve any issues that you might have. Do pop them into the Q&A at the bottom, and we will answer them as we can. We have a comment from Mel that I'll read out if that's okay, Mel. A degree in archaeology teaches you many transferable skills that are attracted to a range of employers. This is very true. So for Mel, she gained problem solving, analytical approaches, cultural awareness, and data and insights thanks to lots of cataloguing. I think that's a really important point to make, that it's not a degree that, it's not a degree that pigeonholes you into one career, which it certainly leads you into archaeology, but it's a very transferable skill set. And I think we see that too in the skills passport, where we have all of those transferable skills that if you decide, like Megan or Georgia, to change purpose your archaeological skills, all of those skills are readily applicable to other places. Do we have any other questions? Let's see.
While people are thinking there, I'll just quickly add in and that the survey of the discipline, 7 of the top 10 skills desired by employers are not archaeological. They are emotional maturity, communication, intercultural communication. I think GIS comes in at number 7 or something like that. And then, May's point as well, it's not that we necessarily want more archaeologists. We might want to have more representativity within archaeologists, but we want the allies out there. It's the way of thinking about, it's like when that aha moment when students first recognize a stone tool. You can never unsee that stone tool or any other stone tool again, and your world changes. And to me, that's what we're about. Because we don't want too many archaeologists because they'll compete for all of our funding, maybe. So there you go.
Well, while we're perhaps waiting for some questions to come through, I did have a final backup question, if I might impinge upon you, Dave, one final time. And I was wondering, you've been working with as a conduit between in the Indigenous community and non-Indigenous communities for a long time, and doing collaborative projects on country with landowners and community. I was wondering if you might have any ideas that we could put out there with our colleagues in the teaching space, in primary, secondary, tertiary, about what sorts of collaborations there might be between teachers and archaeologists and First Nations communities around Australia, and how we might pursue those into the future.
Sure. Yeah, I call myself a jack of all trades. I think that's a bit of a summary of what you become as you become working as a practitioner in archaeology over time. For me, it's if we can commence as like your children are doing now, and this is where the world's changing, it's wonderful, can start introducing Indigenous respect, knowledges from your particular part of the world coming through discussions, and having elders present so that they're not a foreign sort of entity in your learning. It opens the opportunities in your respect earlier, and then therefore your thought process of, say, for example, a lot of young students coming into archaeology hear about the consultancy side and, oh, this is good money. That should be the last thing why you should do archaeology. It's become that. So learning earlier, so there is that respect, opens so many more opportunities for you as you pursue your studies from secondary on. It may be Indigenous histories, but the more contact you have with communities and hear and learn, it opens the doors. It might be for managing a community organisation if you're asked or something. So my thing there is that the earlier you learn and become aware, the greater opportunities there are for you for employment, but also making a benefit, what I would say, to the management of Australia's heritage. As I've said for decades, Australia's Indigenous heritage, it belongs to all of us. It's the tree roots of our national, going forward as a contemporary multicultural nation. It provides that as a nation, our sort of collective identity, or the tree roots for it. So having that being taught early to students and having it in our curriculum, so we're more aware, opens the doors for both employment, but also for a greater multicultural and respectful Australia. And I think history and archaeology and the truth telling of that, and then the mutual partnerships of learning together with old and new worldviews, I think is the key. And I'm glad to see this happening. So in a nutshell, that's what I would say to students. And enjoy the learning journey ahead. We now both have textbooks, but also the oral histories of our professors.
I think that is the perfect way to finish us off this evening. Thank you all so much for joining Anketal here tonight for our panel. Anketal will be bringing out this year a range of teaching resources for that deep time unit in the Australian curriculum. So do keep an eye on AAA's website for when those are coming out. And there is a new book, as Dave mentioned, that he and his colleague Duncan Wright have written, and that will be launched in July at the Victorian History Teachers Association conference. So we're all eagerly anticipating the launch of your book, Dave, and we look forward to that. So thank you, everyone. We're going to finish up now, and we hope to see you at next year's webinar for Anketal and National Archaeology Week.